The quarterback position this year just doesn't feel that interesting. And I think a big part of that is that it feels like Davius Richard than everybody else. Oh, yeah, it's Locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked on HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked on HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and now contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Celebrated with a little bit of Saints shirt on today, so I'm happy to add that to the intro. But still, even with that addition, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Might even be more of a reason to do that. Don't forget the S at the beginning and the end of South Exclusives. Now, today's episode is all about the quarterback position. We'll wrap it up with why the addition of Damon Stewart to Alabama State doesn't seem like good news for D. Davis. Should make him a little bit more nervous. Before that, we will list out my 5 most interesting, or really 4 most interesting quarterback situations amongst all HBCUs. Before any of that, let's label and discuss the quarterback position for what it is. It is a position that just is not very interesting. And the problem with the quarterback position to me is that it's Davius Richard than everybody else. It's not Davius Richard, this person that everybody. It's everybody else after Davius Richard. That's how it feels. And that, I think, is either, it's kind of like a chicken and an egg. I don't know if it's that way because nobody else generates intrigue, or because it's that way, nobody else generates intrigue. It could go either way. But I read the HBCU Sports top 5 quarterbacks to watch. Remember, it's not a top 5 list. It's just top 5 to watch. And my biggest takeaway from it was, man, this position just isn't that interesting. It just doesn't make you buy in. Doesn't make you care. Like, and listen, there are good players who don't make you care. Every good movie isn't a blockbuster movie. So don't equate quality to intrigue. Don't equate the two, right? Because I'm not trying to say that there's just no good players. I'm just saying, if you want to correlate quality to intrigue, I'm saying there's nobody who seems to be competing with Davius Richard. And that kind of feels boring. It's no race. It's no question. Who's the best quarterback in the HBCU landscape? Davius Richard. And my thing about it is, even if I feel like it could be the case, I could feel like we feel like, all right, for example, in the NFL, it's Patrick Mahomes, then it kind of feels like it's everybody else. But maybe it's because it's a couple of players over there. But we all know Pat's the best. Pat's the guy. Yet I still feel there's a lot of intrigue in the quarterback position. That's what I'm looking for out of HBCUs, but it's just not there. And it doesn't feel like there's even a guy that people are using as a shot in the dark, somebody that they're just throwing out there. Like, oh, this guy can compete with Davius Richard. I don't hear that at all. It's Davius Richard, then it's everybody else. Now, here's the thing. Last year, you might have felt like it was Shedeur than everybody else. I can tell you it wasn't. I can tell you that it wasn't. I remember last year people throwing names out there of guys who could maybe compete with Shedeur and could possibly be, heck, the best quarterback in the SWAC. There's not even a conversation. We know that Richard's the best in the MEAC. And I don't hear anybody speaking of the guy in the SWAC who's going to compete with him. Even meeting off in the Celebration Bowl. I've never heard somebody like, oh, these two are going to meet. I can't wait to see Richard and fill in the blank. No, none of that. It's just very odd to me. It's very odd to me. And I won't list off the people on here because I feel like that will come off as a diss. I'm not trying to call them boring players in the slightest. I'm just saying, they ain't Davius Richard. Heck, even with Shedeur, it was about, can he replicate his freshman year? With Richard, he has 3 years of production. They constantly went up. but you know who he is. You either like it or you don't. There's no question in if he has this skill set or anything like that. No, it's just he's Richard. He's been here for 3 years. He's going to be what he's going to be, and we like it. Most of us do, at least, you know? So it's one of those things where I'm sure somebody will arise once the season has started, but going into the season, I think this might be a major reason you just don't hear people talk about quarterbacks that much. Because I haven't heard any other quarterback spoken about frequently other than him and D. Davis. And D. Davis has been about negativity. So, it's not really equal to me. Now, maybe you could say quarterback competitions. But in my mind, the majority of quarterback competitions not creating buy-in. And that's the question. How many quarterbacks out here, in your opinion, are making multiple fan bases care? And not just your team, not just your rival, but multiple. Like, how many SWAC quarterbacks are making MEAC fan bases care? How many MEAC quarterbacks are making SWAC fan bases care? Do we care about Draylon Ellis? Do we care about the North Carolina A&T competition? Right? See, I'm different. I try to exclude myself in these conversations because I cover teams. So I find intrigue in different things. And actually, we'll do that in the second segment. But I find intrigue in things that I believe most fans do not. Even if I wasn't talking on here, I think I'd find intrigue in things that most fans do not, you know? But to the quarterback battles, I see Alcorn. And maybe because Aaron Allen was injured, doesn't really get the juices flowing. Jackson State, they have a bunch. They have a ton of quarterbacks. It just feels like they have just a boatload of quarterbacks there. And it feels like Jason Brown is going to be the guy. But even after the spring game, I don't feel like I heard Jackson State fans speaking so glowingly about Jason Brown. Now, as I say that, they'll probably be in my comments and start speaking glowingly about Jason Brown. But that's okay. Appreciate it. But the real point is, nobody seems to be generating a bunch of conversation outside of Davius Richard. Thankfully for me, I find certain situations a little bit more interesting than I feel like other people do, and hopefully I can sway you. So just because I believe that this quarterback position overall is boring because it's Davius Richard than everyone else doesn't mean I won't focus on the everyone else. Matter of fact, let me give you my top 4 most interesting quarterback situations as we continue with Locked on HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is the #1 sports book out there. That's why they're the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. Go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn to put your money down and get your money back, because I know that you are a smart bettor. I know that you know exactly what odds to hit on, whether they're same game parlays, whether you stringing together some bets, whether you're doing some one-offs, doesn't matter. My thing about FanDuel that I think I appreciate more than anything else is that how many of us are actually really good when we start anything? So if this is your first time putting some money down, you have the no sweat first bet. Now that's something that I find intriguing, because if you lose your first bet, you get up to $1,000 back in free bets. You hear me right. If you lose your first bet, if you're new to FanDuel, you lose your first bet, you make up to $1,000 back in free bets. Give me that 10 times out of 10, because there's no losing the first time. If at first you don't succeed, you just go ahead and get some money back, put your money down again, and try again. It's just that simple, but you have to go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn to make every moment more. And as we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked on HBCU, I appreciate you for making us your first listen of the day. Every day on tomorrow's episode, we're going to kind of continue with our Alabama roll a little bit, because the Auburn head coach actually suggested a spring game scrimmage between them and some of the smaller schools. I want to dig into that on tomorrow's episode. But first, I told you, I'm rooting for Reggie Barlow. But it's Renegade time, baby. All right? Now, XFL champions, Renegades, Arlington, AMA brought it back to the city. Thank you very much. Now that I have my very non-humble brag out of the way, I'm repping a lot today. But it's okay, because we repping winners. We're going to list off our top 4 most interesting quarterback situations. This is really a top 5, but it's top 4, and you'll see why at the end of the segment. But let's first identify why we're saying quarterback situations and not just quarterbacks or quarterback battles. And that kind of explains it. That's a lot. These are my top 4 most interesting quarterbacks and quarterback battles. Now I'm just going to say quarterback situations. It just brings quarterbacks who have already cemented their spot and quarterbacks who are fighting for their spots all together underneath one umbrella. Okay, now with that clarification being out of the way, my number 1 quarterback situation is North Carolina Central. And I know I just spoke about it's Davius Richard than everybody else. So why is this interesting? Why am I buying in? Because this is the one quarterback who makes everybody care. See, I don't hate on prolonged success. And I also don't get bored by it. I don't undervalue it. All of those things are important. And all of those things are present here. See, Davius Richard, like I said, has been doing what he's been doing for a while. Over 2,000 yards throwing every single year. Continue to elevate every single year. But I'm interested. Where does he finish in the record books for North Carolina Central? I'm interested. Where does he get drafted if he gets drafted in the NFL draft? And I understand that that is not something that plays out during the season, but I feel like when we're just talking about quarterbacks and quarterback situations, that can be included. See, but even if you don't want to do that, even if you want to take that out, I'm interested to see, can Davius Richard lead North Carolina Central to back-to-back Celebration Bowl victories? See, whether you want to take the Celebration Bowl or if you want to go ahead and go to being drafted and breaking a 15-year drought, both of those are more interesting individually, let alone putting them together. But individually, both of those are way more interesting than anything any other school has going on. And that's not to slight anybody, because I do find interest in other people, such as my number 2 team, Texas Southern. Now, this is no bias. I could take down my flag for this and still say this. But you have to look at Andrew Body. See, last year, Andrew Body had a lot of weight put on him. Figuratively, not adding weight. But he had a lot of weight put on him, and all of that weight is being transferred to this year. See, I kind of feel like the fact that he didn't get an all-SWAC representation, he wasn't first team or second team, kind of a disappointment, probably in their eyes. You know, I thought he had a solid season. Every time I seen him, I thought he looked pretty good. And especially with the team picking up success at the end of the year. But I'm sure that individual accolade, though people try to say it's team first. Okay, team first, but you second, you still count. It's not team first and nothing else. It's team first and you second, okay? And I'm sure that he wanted that all-SWAC nomination. And matter of fact, when I say that people were pushing Shedeur Sanders, this was a quarterback that had a lot of excitement and people genuinely felt could possibly push Shedeur for that number 1 spot, and for sure would be that second team all-SWAC quarterback. That just wasn't the case. Now Shedeur is gone. He could be a second team, or he could elevate the first team. These are things that are going to be interesting to watch. And, you know, the team success of the Tigers is definitely going to be a thing. I think they're primed to be a real contender. But if we're just talking about quarterbacks, Andrew Body is going to have to step up in order for that to be the case. It is. I feel like his success is directly correlated to how the team's going to go. 100% Andrew Body should be the engine of TSU this year. But the person that he's competing with for that number 1 spot in my mind is Jeremy Moussa, which brings me to my number 3 most interesting quarterback situation, the FAMU Rattlers. Now, Jeremy Moussa is a guy who was the second team all-SWAC quarterback. The first team all-SWAC quarterback is gone. Shedeur is no longer here. He's in Colorado. And last time I checked, no matter how well he plays in Colorado, and correct me if I'm wrong, I could be wrong. They might have made some new rules, some new bylaws. But no matter how well he plays in Colorado, he cannot be the first team all-SWAC quarterback. Why are we not discussing the second team all-SWAC quarterback more? Why are we not talking about Jeremy Moussa being the best quarterback in the SWAC? Because if we go by the all-SWAC teams, well, Jeremy Moussa is the the best returning quarterback. Matter of fact, I think Moussa versus Body should be a larger conversation. And maybe if I can get my hands on some all 22 so I can see the whole field, Texas Southern tape, maybe I will make that argument. Maybe I will spark that conversation of Moussa versus Body. Maybe that's a thing. I don't know. But all I do know is that should be a bigger conversation than I feel like it really is. And really with Moussa, it's about, hey, are you going to be able to lead FAMU to the promised land this year? All the pressure around FAMU, I'm not saying it's directly put on Moussa, because I think a lot of people look at that defense. but we should be questioning what Moussa is going to do, especially with Xavier Smith no longer there and having to find a new number one receiver. Probably be Shareed. I know they just picked up a guy from Bethune-Cookman, but all of those things are up in the air. All of those things are things we should be questioning. And now finally, there's no connection to first and second and third. But now the fourth, you have Benedict College, right? The 1D2 team. And the first quarterback battle that I'm actually throwing on this list. But I don't even know if it's really a battle. It feels like Xavier Foster is going to be the guy. He didn't play in the spring game, but he played the majority of the first team reps when it came to spring practice. So I think he's going to be the guy. All right. But the reason this is interesting is because you're losing Eric Phoenix to the transfer portal. Now, no one's picked him up. Phoenix could return. It very well could return to Benedict. I don't know. You know, it's not like the portal means people are gone and never come back. It just means that they're gone for the moment. But let's just operate with the idea that Phoenix is gone, right? If Phoenix is gone and you just had a historic season and now you're losing your all second team SEAC quarterback, you already were going to struggle to put that together again, no matter what. But now that you're losing a player like him, it's kind of like, man, this is going to be extremely more difficult. I thought that Coach Berry was the guy who was going to leave, but it ended up being the quarterback. Now, the quarterback doesn't have a home. He's retweeting this one guy who's doing a lot of Alabama State promotion, but I'm just saying, but he does not have a home right now, and I can't wait to see how he's replaced. Xavier Foster, you're going to have some big shoes to fill. Let's see if you can fill them. And going forward, I kind of mentioned them already, but my fifth spot, so this really is a top five, but the fifth number, and not just because it's my number, gets its own spot. Alabama State, is it Eric Phoenix? I don't know. But they did just add one player from the transfer portal, and that's Damon Stewart out of University of Alabama, Birmingham. And that should make D. Davis a little bit nervous. And we'll dive into the reasoning as we continue with Locked on HBCU. And as we're wrapping up with today's episode of Locked on HBCU, I appreciate you for making us your first listen of the day, every day, making it all the way to segment 3. I thank you 2 times for that, genuinely and truly. Now, the addition of Damon Stewart should make D. Davis a little bit nervous. I think that is trouble for D. Davis. Now, base information for you. Damon Stewart is a transfer quarterback coming into Alabama State from University of Alabama, Birmingham. All right, so he's staying within the state, but he is a transfer. That is the base information that you need to know. Now let's talk about the big story, why this is trouble. This is trouble because who's adding a quarterback this late if you're certain of your quarterback situation? Right, so put who he is in the pocket. Let's not worry about his skill set, his qualifications, any of those things. Put that in your pocket. We'll get to that later. But just what he represents is a new quarterback to the mix at a time when you really don't want any new quarterbacks added to the mix. See, if I was certain of my quarterback situation, I'm not doing this. See, the uncertainty of the quarterback situation continues to grow. The best thing for D. Davis this year was when Miles Crawley transferred out. Right? So Miles Crawley transferred out of Alabama State, went to Grambling. I thought this was good for Davis because that was the competition. That was the backup quarterback last year. And yes, I know that Davis actually won that spot. But if you follow how things have been looking, how people have been talking, you would have thought that Crawley had a chance. But he left. And I'm like, okay, this is D. Davis' spot. But then it's been a linear line. Straightforward, like no up and down, no back and forth, straightforward line of doubt that has just been surrounding D. Davis. Oh, he didn't look that good in the spring game. Oh, we looking at his 2022? Yeah, 2022 tape. I wasn't that strong. Nothing too major, right? And it's not really coming from the coaches, but it's coming from a bunch of observers. And it's just like, yeah, we didn't love it. And I think he has some peace. Like, if he can play like he did in the Howard game, oh, Alabama State's going to be straight. They're going to be okay. But if he plays like he did in most of the games that weren't the Howard game, Alabama State might be struggling and have to depend on their defense to hold teams to under 14 points on a consistent basis. And you don't want that. So apparently during spring practice, maybe he looked more like he looked in all the other games. that weren't Howard? I don't know. But what I do know is that adding a quarterback to the mix this late tells me you don't really trust your quarterback situation. Now, of course, there are no absolutes in this world. There's no absolute. So when I say that, it's not like, what about this one? Yeah, there's exceptions. And I'll bring the exception to the table. Howard University, the Bison, they brought in a quarterback. However, that quarterback's young and their quarterback's a senior. You can easily look at this as a future move. You can easily look at this as non-threats to your actual quarterback, and you trust your quarterback. Like, we trust Quentin Williams. Like, that's the thing. It's not as if, oh, we don't know what's up with Quentin Williams. There's no doubt around Quentin Williams. Second team All-MEAC quarterback last year. He's going to be the man this year. This guy is just coming in to be a backup and maybe the quarterback of the future afterwards, right? Because Williams doesn't have much time left. It's the inverse here. Davis is the young one. Stewart is a senior. See, now that's my problem. Stewart did not come here to be a backup. Stewart came here with the feeling that, you know what, I'm gonna play. That doesn't mean he's guaranteed anything. Like last year, D. Davis transferred in, and it kind of felt like he was essentially handed the keys to the truck. Like, this is your car, drive it. We gonna rock with you this year. And maybe it's because he came from Auburn, maybe it's because we know who he was as a quarterback in high school, and it wasn't that long ago. I don't know, right? But he was given the keys to the truck, essentially. Everybody knew this was his job as soon as he transferred in. I'm not putting that on Stewart. A, maybe because it didn't work that well for Davis last year. But the B, I'm not giving up on on Davis. This is not give up on Davius or D. Davis time. This is not. This is not the moment to say, you know what, D. Davis just ain't the guy. He never will be. I'm still not certain that he won't be the starter next year. So I just want to be clear. I know I've kind of discussed how people have spoken about him and said I'll do my own research, and people who have been doing a little bit more in-depth look on him and realized, maybe my feeling from that one game wasn't as strong as it should have been. But I'm not giving up on D. Davis. I'm not counting him out. I don't think he needs to be saved. He's a young quarterback. That was his first year playing collegiate football. This will be his second year if he plays. So I'm not giving up on him at all. I'm just saying this should make you a little bit nervous. This should put a little giddy in you up. Is that a thing? I don't know. But it is now. The addition of Damon Stewart, yeah, there we go. The addition of Damon Stewart should put a little giddy in the up of D. Davis. I like that. Write that down. I have a list of sayings. That's adding to the list. But look, overall, you're adding a quarterback after May. You've seen what you saw in the spring. Still felt the need to add somebody, and this is a senior. I'm not saying he's going to be given a spot, but I will guarantee you he has some sort of assurance that he will be able to compete for the spot. You're a senior. You're going into your last year. Why would you do this if you don't feel like you can start here? It just doesn't make logical sense. So I'm going to go with what seems logical, and that's the fact that they brought in a quarterback who has an opportunity to start when you had a starting quarterback returning from last year. That's not good for D. Davis. That better put a little giddiness up. Whether you want to say it's a good phrase or not, you know what I mean, and it better do it. All right? That's heat. I don't care what you say. But I appreciate you for making us your first listen of the day every day. I genuinely do. Oh, first, actually, rewind. Let me just give you a quick, because there's not much to say about Damon Stewart. He hasn't played much football in community college or at UAB. He's a very raw prospect. He was a 2-star coming out of high school. We don't know what to expect from Damon Stewart. That's another reason he's not just going to be given the keys. We don't know this guy. I don't know what to expect from him. This is a wait-and-see edition, meaning he came in, and I feel like it means trouble for D. Davis, but I'm going to wait, and I'm going to see exactly either if he gets the spot or what he provides and how he's discussed once the fall camp starts. Now, and I already did, but now I can say it. I appreciate you for making us your first listen of the day. Every day on tomorrow's episode, we'll continue with Alabama discussion, whether it's Alabama State, Alabama A&M, probably a mixture of both, and the Auburn head coach saying he would enjoy some spring game scrimmages between them and some of the smaller Alabama schools. We'll dive into exactly what that could mean on tomorrow's episode. But in the meantime, in between time, I appreciate you for making us your first listen of the day every day. Until the next time that we hear each other, family, Take care. Stay blessed. Peace.